Have you ever felt like you see too much? Like you're observing layers of reality that others seem blind to, as if you're living in a world asleep, surrounded by people satisfied with surface answers, while you carry the burden of perceiving what lies beneath? If so, you're not alone and you're not crazy. And think, what if the very clarity that awakens you is what isolates you? What if your greatest curse is your most profound gift? In today's journey, we're going to explore the piercing insight of one of the most enigmatic philosophers in history, Friedrich Nietzsche, and how his life and thoughts unveil a shocking truth. The more you see, the harder it is to belong. Yet there is power, immense power, hidden in that solitude. A power that, once understood, can transform how you see yourself, the world, and your place in it. Stay with me, because what we're about to uncover might just shift your understanding of awareness, sanity, and the hidden price of consciousness. And the last insight, oh yes, the last, is the most important of all. It will challenge the very foundation of how you define truth and yourself. Let us begin. Imagine a young man born into a deeply religious family, groomed for the pulpit, expected to inherit the values of tradition and blind faith, but something in him couldn't conform. It wasn't rebellion for rebellion's sake, it was a hunger for deeper truth. Friedrich Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher, he was a psychological seismograph, registering the tremors of a dying moral order and a coming storm no one else seemed to notice. He once wrote, "Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed." Now pause. Do you relate to that? Have you ever spoken the truth and been met with silence, anger, or worse, mockery? Have you ever been labeled too intense, or too sensitive, or too much, simply because you refused to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't? This is the first sign. The moment your perception begins to widen, discomfort follows. Not just your own discomfort, but the discomfort you cause in others merely by existing authentically. Awareness disturbs, and the more you see, the more isolated you can become. Nietzsche knew this. He called it the path of the higher man, the individual who breaks free from the herd to forge his own meaning. But the price? Alienation, misunderstanding, pain. He warned us, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But what if your why, the deep sense of purpose you carry, is invisible to those around you? What if your internal compass points in a direction no one else believes exists? That's when the fear begins to creep in, the doubt, the whisper that says, maybe they're right, maybe you are broken, maybe you are crazy. But you're not. You are awakening. This awakening is not romantic. It is not peaceful. It is often violent, an inner revolution that tears through the scaffolding of your inherited beliefs. You start to question everything. The news, religion, the motives behind your career, the relationships you keep. Nothing escapes the lens of awareness once it sharpens. And this clarity can be devastating. Why? Because clarity shatters comfort, and most people are addicted to comfort. Nietzsche wrote, "The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die." Growth demands the shedding of illusion, but that shedding is not painless. It's an existential shedding of identity, of belonging. When Nietzsche famously declared that God is dead, he wasn't mocking faith. He was mourning the loss of spiritual anchoring in a world that no longer believed in the old gods, but hadn't yet found a replacement. That limbo, between what no longer works and what is not yet born, is where many awakened minds find themselves today. Can you feel that space, that disorientation? Welcome to the desert of truth. But here's the paradox. While others may see you as mad for questioning everything, this very questioning is what separates the awake from the asleep. Nietzsche said that madness in individuals is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. So perhaps you're not crazy for doubting the collective. Perhaps the collective has simply normalized insanity in palatable forms, shallow distractions, blind obedience, synthetic happiness. Is it any wonder you feel like a stranger? Nietzsche often spoke of the free spirit, a person unbound by dogma, who walks alone, not out of arrogance, but necessity. The free spirit cannot follow blindly. They must forge their own truth, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. But make no mistake, the solitude of the free spirit is not weakness, it is preparation. Because when the illusions crumble, it is the awake who will be ready to build anew. But let me ask you this. Have you ever tried to explain your thoughts to someone and been met with that glazed look, as if your words were noise, not signal? That is not your failure to communicate. That is the cost of depth in a world drowning in the shallow. Nietzsche understood that language often fails to capture truth. He turned to metaphor, to parable, to poetic violence in his writing, not to obscure, but to break through. He knew that the mind resists direct confrontation with uncomfortable truths. It must be seduced into seeing. That is why awakening feels like madness at first, because the world around you is still asleep and you've seen too much. And yet, you're here, still standing, still seeking. So tell me, when was the moment you began to see through the illusion? Do you remember it? Share it in the comments. Others need to hear your story. Someone out there feels alone in their clarity, and your words might remind them they're not the only one hearing the music. Stay with me, because next, we're going even deeper, into the root of Nietzsche's vision of the human spirit, and the secret behind the collapse and rebirth of meaning itself. You've made it this far. The most powerful insight is still to come, and it changes everything. You've come this far, and now we go deeper, into the very architecture of meaning itself and the unbearable weight of consciousness. Nietzsche did not simply observe the world, he dismantled it, not to leave it in ruins, but to expose the hollow scaffolding behind what most people call truth. But what happens when truth itself becomes too heavy to carry? Let's begin with a question that strikes at the heart of your inner experience. Have you ever reached a point where nothing felt real anymore? Where the rituals of daily life, the roles people play, the very structure of society, suddenly looked like a theater? Nietzsche called this the twilight of the idols. It's that moment when the gods you once believed in, literal or metaphorical, no longer speak to you. This collapse is terrifying, but also necessary, because until the false idols fall, you cannot build a truth that is yours. Nietzsche knew this collapse intimately. His own life mirrored the same unraveling he saw in culture. He was a professor by age 24, a genius, but his ideas were too much, too soon. He questioned everything: religion, morality, science, society. He called Christianity a slave morality, not out of cruelty, but because he saw how it encouraged passivity, guilt, and obedience over strength, creation, and responsibility. To Nietzsche, morality wasn't universal. It was invented, manufactured by those in power to control those without it. Harsh? Perhaps. But think, how many of your beliefs do you hold because you truly chose them? And how many were handed to you before you even had the awareness to question? Here's the danger of seeing too much. You start to realize that very few people are truly free. Most are performing, most are repeating, most are surviving, not living. And when you call that out, when you step out of the script, you become a threat. And threats are often labeled as unstable. But Nietzsche saw through it all. He wasn't preaching nihilism, he was confronting it. He once said, "Man would rather will nothingness than not will at all." This is a brutal truth. It means that when people feel meaningless, they will cling to anything: ideology, addiction, distraction, just to escape the unbearable silence of existence. So what does one do in the face of this silence? Nietzsche had an answer, one of the most radical ever proposed. He called it the Übermensch, the overman, or beyond man, not a superior race, not a tyrant, but an ideal, a goal. A human being who creates their own values, who lives with artistic intensity, who turns their suffering into strength. He wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." Can you feel the weight of that line? It's not arrogance, it's loneliness. The higher your perspective, the fewer people can join you there. And yet, he still invites us to rise, to suffer consciously, to become the sculptors of our own souls. But the transformation he describes is not pretty. It's not a sanitized self-help journey. It is a violent rebirth, a death of the old self, followed by an uncertain, trembling step into the unknown. This is where many turn back. It's too much, too lonely, too painful, but not you. You're still here. Let's be honest. Have you ever felt emotionally exhausted by your own awareness? Have you wished, even for a moment, that you could just not care so much? That you could close your eyes and believe what everyone else believes? This is the burden of insight. It isolates, it wounds, it scars, but it also awakens. It transforms. Nietzsche said, One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. He wasn't romanticizing disorder. He was revealing a deeper law of nature. Creation emerges from destruction. Meaning is born from the ruins of illusion. Your chaos is not a defect. It is the raw material of becoming. But the world is not built for those who think like this. The modern world, with all its comforts, encourages sedation. Scroll, consume, obey. Do not ask too many questions. Do not deviate from the path. Do not think too much, feel too deeply, or question the rules. And yet, here you are, deviating, thinking, feeling, questioning. What does that make you? A threat or a pioneer? The world may label you sensitive, overthinking, dramatic, but Nietzsche would call you awake, a human being with the potential to rise beyond your programming, a being capable of embracing suffering not as a curse but as a crucible. And yes, that process can look like madness. Nietzsche himself fell into silence in the final decade of his life. Some say it was syphilis. Others suggest mental illness. But there's another theory, a poetic one, that his mind burned too brightly, that he saw too much, felt too deeply, and had no one to carry that burden with. Imagine carrying visions of a future no one else can see, truths no one else will face. That loneliness is not insanity. It's the price of vision. So let me ask you again, when the world calls you mad, who do you believe? Them or your own soul? This is the turning point, the moment when seeing too much becomes not a curse, but a calling. And if you're still watching, it means something in you knows this path is yours. You were not meant to stay asleep. You were meant to awaken, and perhaps to awaken others. So tell me in the comments, what is the one truth you see that others often reject? Let this be a place where those who see too much find one another. Your words might be the spark someone else needs to begin their own awakening, because in the next part, we're going deeper still. We'll explore the most dangerous idea Nietzsche ever proposed, the one that rewires everything. Your past, your pain, your purpose, the one that once understood can break you or liberate you completely. And yes, it's the one that will change everything. You've stayed with this journey, and now we arrive at the edge of Nietzsche's most shocking idea, the one that bends time, warps perception, and forces a confrontation with yourself so intimate, so relentless, that many turn away before understanding it fully. He called it eternal return. Imagine this. Every moment of your life, every pain, every joy, every mistake, every kiss, every regret, repeating itself, not once, not twice, but infinitely. Nietzsche asked, what if a demon were to creep after you into your loneliest loneliness and say, this life as you now live it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more. Could you bear it? Could you embrace it? Or would you collapse under the weight of such an idea? This is not a fantasy, not to Nietzsche. The eternal return was a philosophical test, a way to measure your life, your choices, your truth. He believed that if you cannot will your life to repeat eternally, then you are not truly living. Let that sink in. What if the only way to live meaningfully is to live as though every choice will echo forever? This idea is terrifying, but also illuminating, because it forces you to ask, am I living in such a way that I would choose this life again? If the answer is no, then Nietzsche's challenge is clear. Change. Not tomorrow, not next year. Now. Because time, as we experience it, is finite. But your choices, those ripple across generations, your way of being, your courage, your silence, your rebellion, your love, they all matter more than you think. But let's go deeper. The eternal return is not just about choices, it's about embracing the fullness of life without denial. Most people live by halves. They welcome joy, reject pain. They chase love, avoid heartbreak. They pray for light, flee the dark. But Nietzsche knew that to truly awaken, you must say yes to all of it. You must say yes even to your suffering. He called this radical acceptance amor fati, the love of one's fate. Not just enduring what happens, but loving it. Loving everything that has happened. Not because it was easy, or fair, or right, but because it shaped you, because it forged you, because it is you. Can you love your scars? Can you love your failures? Can you love the very things you once thought broke you? Nietzsche dares us to say yes, because only then do we reclaim our power from the illusion of victimhood. Only then do we stop outsourcing our worth to circumstance. Only then can we truly create our lives, rather than just survive them. This is where the awakening begins to feel like rebirth. You begin to see that your pain was never punishment. It was preparation. That your solitude wasn't exile. It was initiation. That seeing too much was not madness. It was the beginning of wisdom, but it takes courage. Nietzsche once wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." Think about that. Think about how many times you've had to bite your tongue, dim your light, pretend to believe, just to avoid being seen as different. How many parts of yourself have you buried just to be accepted? But what if those parts, the ones you've silenced, hidden, disowned, what if they are the very key to your freedom? The Eternal Return asks, if you must live your life again and again, are you willing to live it honestly? Are you willing to stand in your truth even if it costs you comfort or community or certainty? This is where Nietzsche's path splits from most philosophical thought. He doesn't hand you a system. He doesn't give you commandments. He offers no final answers. Instead, he throws you into the fire of your own becoming. He forces you to ask, what does it mean to be you, fully, without compromise? And most terrifying of all, no one else can answer that for you. Because your truth, your purpose, your why must be forged in the crucible of your own confrontation with life. You may feel alone in this. You may feel like you are the only one wrestling with these questions, but you are not. Look around. Look at the comments, the echoes of souls who, like you, have seen too much, felt too deeply, asked too often. This is your tribe, not by blood, but by vision. Nietzsche wrote, "Invisible threads are the strongest ties." The bonds we share as seekers, as visionaries, as those who carry the burden of deeper awareness, those bonds transcend time, language, and distance. And this is where the paradox begins to soften. Because the deeper you go into your solitude, the more you begin to feel a quiet connection with others who have made the same journey. The ones who know what it feels like to cry, not just from pain, but from the overwhelming beauty of existence. The ones who have sat with their shadow and not run. The ones who have walked through fire and found themselves not destroyed, but refined. So let me ask you now, if you had to live your life over exactly as it has been, would you say yes? And if not, what must you change, starting today, so that you could? Let that question linger. Sit with it. Because in the final chapter of this journey, we're going to bring everything together. The pain, the power, the purpose. And in that final revelation, we'll uncover the most profound truth Nietzsche ever whispered beneath his words. The truth that awakens not only your mind, but your will. Your capacity not just to understand, but to become. Now we arrive, not at an end, but at a threshold. One that Nietzsche hinted at in fragments, aphorisms, and fire. A truth so primal, so piercing, that it does not shout, it waits. Hidden behind everything he ever wrote is not despair, not even chaos, but potential. Raw, terrifying, magnificent potential. And it all leads here, to the most powerful idea of all, the will to power. What is it? Many misunderstand it. They think it means domination, control, or violence. But Nietzsche meant something far more profound. The will to power is not about controlling others. It is about becoming who you truly are, without apology, without masks, without permission. It is the force that drives a seed to break through stone, the force that pulls a soul out of numbness into fire, the force that says, "I will not shrink." The will to power is the creative pulse within you. It is the part of you that doesn't just endure suffering, but transforms it, that doesn't just see the world, but dares to shape it. But to awaken this force, something must die, and that something is your false self, the self built from expectations, fears, roles, and inherited beliefs, the self that was trained to obey, to fit in, to play small. To Nietzsche, this self is a prison, and the only way out is through discomfort, through isolation, through the unbearable honesty of asking, what am I afraid to become? Because here's the ultimate revelation. You are not broken. You are unfinished. You are not too sensitive. You are deeply tuned. You are not too much. You are just now learning to take up your rightful space. What you've called anxiety may be suppressed creativity. What you've called depression may be buried purpose. What you've called madness may be the first stage of metamorphosis. Nietzsche knew that transformation is not graceful. It is violent, it is destructive. It strips you of all that is false until only the essential remains. And when that moment comes, when the lies have burned away, something extraordinary happens. Silence, not emptiness but presence. A stillness that feels like power, the power of self-possession, of no longer needing to be validated, approved or understood. The power of walking alone, not because no one would walk with you, but because your path is yours alone. And from that stillness, a new self begins to emerge. Not the self you were told to be, not the self you pretended to be, but the self you choose to be. The creator, the author, the artist of your own becoming. This is the will to power. Not force over others, but authority over yourself. Not escape from suffering, but mastery through it. Not waiting for meaning, but forging it with your bare hands. And here lies Nietzsche's final gift, one that most people miss. He wasn't leading us into despair. He was showing us how to be free. Not comfortable, not liked, not safe, but free. Free to think without chains. Free to live without guilt. Free to die without regret. This is the life of the awakened one. The one who has seen too much and yet still chooses to create, to love, to rise. Because in the end, seeing too much is not a curse. It's a calling, a responsibility, a sacred trust. You are not crazy. You are awake in a world that prefers sleep, and the world will try to pull you back, to numb you, to silence you, to make you small again. But now, you know too much. You've gone too far. You've crossed the threshold that most never reach, and once you've touched this kind of truth, there is no going back. So what now? Now you begin. Begin to speak what you were afraid to say. Begin to move in the direction your soul has always whispered toward. Begin to let go of everything that insults your truth. And as you do, watch how the world begins to shift. Watch how others begin to find you. Not the ones you used to impress, but the ones who recognize the fire in your eyes. The ones who have also seen too much. Together, you form the silent revolution, not of violence, but of vision. Not of noise, but of depth. Not of followers, but of creators. And this is how the world truly changes. Not by force, but by awakening. One soul at a time, starting with yours. So now I ask you, with all the weight of Nietzsche's challenge behind it, will you live as though your life must be lived again and again? Will you love your fate, even the dark corners of it? Will you rise not by escaping the pain, but by turning it into power? Because the moment you do, that is the moment you become unreachable. Unreachable by fear, by conformity, by mediocrity. You become a force, you become free. And that is the most dangerous, most beautiful thing a human can become. Welcome to the other side. Now tell me, who are you becoming? Leave your truth in the comments, your story, your pain, your awakening, because someone out there needs to hear it. And this time they will. This time they're listening, just like you are, right now. And that, perhaps, is the greatest miracle of all. The fact that you're still here, still rising, still becoming. Thanks for looking.